We passed the most significant surveillance reform in decades. We've done it by setting aside ideology, setting aside fear-mongering, said we will protect the security of the United States, but we also protect the privacy of Americans.
Now, that is Senator Pat Leahy of Vermont talking about passing the NRA surveillance bill that also extends provisions of the Patriot Act. Now, he's telling everybody about how it will protect your privacy, but at its heart, a lot of critics say it's really not making that significant of changes to the existing policy. Now, everybody's phone data still be collected, but now the phone companies, not the government, that will collect and hold it. And the NSA can still get it by requesting it, and if they go through the right channels and they get the approvals, it then will switch hands at that point. Okay, Doug, give me from your end what your concerns and hopes were when the Senate retook this, and Rand Paul managed to anger more than a few folks on the Hill, but at the end of the day, did we find the right balance between privacy and protection? Does that balance exist with what the Founding Fathers intended, but also in a 9/11 world?
Well, see, the problem with that question is we don't know, because there's still secrecy over the entire thing.
But doesn't there have to be?
I would say no. You see, that's the whole debate about personal freedom and secrecy. Once you give away your freedom to secrecy, we're all in the dark. So you have a situation where they've given now full control of the data over to corporations. We know that Edward Snowden was working for a corporation that was contracted out by the government when he was a whistleblower. So we know that there's corporations now that are going through this data. They're pulling out the information they want. Now, one of the concerns I have there is whistleblowers like Edward Snowden, and they're going to be quieted now. They know that the corporations that they work for are actively going through the data. And do you know that with all these provisions that they discuss...
Well, I just take issue only in that, and again, I'm ascribing no altruistic reasons to this, but there's been pushback. We've talked about this with Apple and other phone companies that really felt bitten the last time it became public, that they turned over all the data without a scintilla of fight, I grant you, to say, wait a second, we're getting punished by our customers. Forget about national security, because they think that we're turning over their privacy here to the feds and nobody knows where it ends. We're going to make it difficult for them now. They're going to have to give a subpoena. They're going to have to show cause. They're going to have to do the rest here. We're going to go through the right channels instead of just taking their word for it. Why isn't it for, again, just purely capitalist reasons on the part of the companies to try and get more market share? Why isn't it different now? Because there will be a check and a balance, because they don't want to give up anything they don't have to.
Well, they'll give up everything they have to. That's the problem. Every time the government says, give me this, they will give it to them.
But don't you want them to? And I'll give an example, Mayo, in that Boston, what we saw this week, okay, with surveillance, investigation, whether or not the threats were supremely credible or not, there was some scary dialogue that was going on there. We've seen how that's gestated in Paris and the rest here. They didn't just immediately, they go and they waited and we saw what happened. Doesn't there have to be some secrets when it comes to national security, when you're doing surveillance, when you're trying to make with metadata the connections, so you find out if there's terror cells, if you find out if ISIS is recruiting domestically and all the rest? It can't always be on the 5 o'clock news.
Not really, and I think sometimes, I mean, look, lots of times law enforcement does a great job, but sometimes we give a little too much credit and we think that, a police officer is going to jump in front of you and stop the bullet from hitting you. Most of the time, they're there after the person's already shot. They're there after the bomb's gone off. In order to do good police work, good investigation, federal, local, state level, you have to really be in the trenches. You have to have an idea of what's going on. You've built relationships in the communities that are going to lead you to the people that you're looking for. You're not just trolling through 300 million phone calls.
I grant you. But now, Jimmy, let's bring this back to pre-9/11. In Crawford Ranch here, some agent handed over to the president Osama bin Laden determined to attack in U.S., right? And he famously said, fine, you covered your you-know-what here, and I got. The point was, in a post-9/11 world, if we can secure that information and make those intelligence connections, however the data is procured, and I'm doing a big umbrella, okay? We as a nation are safer if our intelligence agencies share intelligence and they can thwart an attack beforehand. If they have no rights for collection of data, sure, we're freer as a people, but at what cost?
Everything you're saying is true. nobody at this table disagrees. I don't think anybody in the country disagrees. The question is the manner in which you do it. There have always been useful tools for the government where if they have any inkling or sufficient inkling that they need information from somewhere,
We're talking
they
about
can,
FISA courts,
they
et
can
cetera,
get
right?
it in a minute. Instead, what they've done now is they've deputized corporations into doing the work for them so that when they need information, they just go and get it
So what would
whenever
you
they
have
want.
liked to have seen that didn't happen this week?
Look, what I want is there not to be a Patriot Act where the government can simply get whatever information they want randomly without reasonable suspicion, without probable cause, just, hey, give me everything on Rich French now. And by the way, you spend the money to collect the data. Listen, we have the greatest investigative tools in this country. You even said it. We knew that bin Laden was planning something. We didn't act on it. We didn't have the Patriot Act when that memo went to the president. We had good old investigative tools. We had the chatter. We knew what was going on. At that point, warrants can be obtained. There's a million things that can be done.
Listen, they're hitting me to break here, but really quickly, I had this debate earlier this week, and I forgot who said it at the table, but it's been said 100 times at this table by different people, elected officials or others. Hey, if I did nothing wrong, I got nothing to worry about here. I'd rather, turn over what I got for more protection at the risk of some privacy. What is your answer? I'll let you both answer it quickly before break.
It's not true because people go to prison all the time and get the death penalty when they didn't do anything wrong. The other thing is, to Jimmy's point, the Germans told us that this attack was going to happen in 9/11. We had lots of time to prepare for it. We didn't need to go through all of the Americans' data in order to figure that out. So it's a question of acting on good intelligence, and even with legislation, acting on and using what we already have. We don't quite often need additional measures. We don't need additional tools.
Rich, when you take a shower, you close the windows so nobody peeks in.
Sometimes.
You have a right to be left alone. You have a right to have private spaces in your life.
All right.
And we're all willing to make sacrifices for safety.
It's
It's
a
just
debate,
how
though,
far we
honestly,
go.
we've still never had in this country. And we always keep saying we need to have this debate. We thought we'd have it with this go-round in Congress, but nobody wants to be soft on terror, myself included. But I think we'll look back one day and say, we really signed up for this. Okay, when we come back here, this story closer to home that many of you remember. This biker gang assaulted a family in Manhattan in broad daylight just a couple of years ago. Well, one of the guys here that was riding with that group was an undercover cop off duty, but he fled the scene when this guy got pulled out of the car and got a beat down instead of helping. Now he's on trial. The question is, was he obligated to stay and help this family, or hey, the guy was off duty and he was scared like anybody else? We'll be right back.